Hello again, this is Nick Roach. It's been a few weeks since I did a video. At 37, and at that time everything had been said, I thought that's it. That'll do me now, 37's plenty. But a few things have occurred to me since then. Because it's winter and the sun's very low, I've had to change the angle of the camera so it's not looking out across the lake, because the sun is coming directly at it and I'll be a black silhouette, which might be better, but so I've had to angle it sideways. Hope that's okay. And again, we're outside, we might get some noise, hopefully not too much, but we shall see. Today I'm going to explain how emotion is like an iceberg. How emotion is like an iceberg. Loud plane overhead, don't know if you can hear that. We're taught at school, excuse me, I'll wait for the plane to go over. We're taught at school that an iceberg only has a very tiny percentage above the surface of the water, and the bulk, something like 90%, I forget, is below the surface. And at school we're amazed, we're absolutely amazed, don't believe it until someone points out in your glass of Coca-Cola, other drinks are available, when you have an ice cube in it, it sits below the water surface. It doesn't sit on top of it. Same thing. So then we accept, okay, icebergs, 90% more, I don't know, are below the surface. And so we come up to an iceberg normally, see the massive thing in the air, have to remember, wow, everything else we can't see is in the water, below the level. Emotion's the same, except we're not teaching it to our school kids, to our children, because even the adults don't seem to know. And even when I mention it to people, the vast majority don't want to know. You see, when you feel some emotion come up, some disturbance about something happening, we would say, right, now I'm emotional. There's emotion here now, I accept it. But when we can't feel the emotion, we go, I'm not emotional, there's no emotion here. And the suggestion there might be 90% of it might still be there, controlling your thoughts, how you interact with things, how you interpret what happens to you, what you look forward to, what you worry about, the body language, how you interact with other people, how you interpret their gestures, all that is all there. Again, we might go, okay, well, maybe, but still, I'm not emotional. But take it further back still, from the perspective of everything being one. Of everything being one vast, although size is irrelevant when everything is one, but one vast being, mind. And this everything being one, and the emotion one feels, takes on a whole new meaning. And I'd love you to get this. Sun's coming out now. You now see why I had to change the camera angle. Hopefully it still picks me up. If you perceive this or imagine this, if need be, as one mind, one being, and in this mind some emotion comes up to the surface, why is it so outrageous if everything is one, created by the one mind, the one being? If some feeling comes up to its conscious awareness, why is it so impossible to think that The rest of the underneath, the energy, is what's creating the outside situation. Because everything is one. One mind, one being, one reality, one existence, one dream. Call it what you will. When the individual, you, have an emotional disturbance as a result of a situation happening outside of you, apparently outside of you, the iceberg analogy comes into play, because the very energy you're feeling as a disturbance is the same very energy that's creating the outside situation. But not just when there's a problem, but every single moment of every single day. From the moment you wake up in the morning to the arms and legs and the body you left behind the night before when you went to sleep. And you wake up in the same bed and look around the room and it's your room. It was the attachment on the bottom of the iceberg, the attachment to that scenario continuing that created that. And that's why you woke up the next day in the same place. And going through your day-to-day life and activities, you don't suddenly walk out of your house and the outside environment is completely different. If it's all a dream, why not? It's because the emotion underneath the surface is keeping the whole thing going as a continuous, structured scenario. Everything in its place. And even if amazing things do happen, there are reasons for it. You can find explanations as to why that happened. Because everything has to be so. The attachment to being separate, the attachment to keeping this whole thing going, is very real. The emotional attachment to being separate is very real. So in the iceberg scenario, you've got the energy under the surface that is not conscious, that you're not aware of, creating every moment of every day, every situation, every physical form, manifestation, every experience, physical, is created by the energy of the iceberg in the unconscious, that's behind the scenes, that you can't feel. You can't see it. All you know is its effect. And to say it's not there is like seeing a leaf, a branch blowing in the wind and trying to claim there is no wind. There's just a branch blowing. Well, I'm telling you there is wind. And there is emotional energy. The attachment to experience, attachment to being separate, keeping the whole dream going all the time. And the little bit you're conscious of, you're aware of, the emotion that comes up, that little bit is only a tiny percentage. Now how does that help you? Well, it's actually absolutely incredible if you can get it. Having accepted the vast majority is in the unconscious, the bit you're not aware of, you can't control, you can't access it, you can't feel it. It's just creating everything that happens. Having accepted that, we deal with what we can interact with, we can feel, and that is the conscious bit. That's the bit when you get a feeling about something, happy, unhappy, worried, frightened, whatever the feeling is. That is the conscious area of the massive iceberg of emotion, that little bit. And do not ignore it. But the amazing thing is, when I say don't ignore it, I also don't want you to go into it and think about and imagine the problem that it's creating underneath the surface. Because don't forget, the conscious bit of unhappiness, let's say, is the tip of the iceberg compared with the massive energy underneath that is creating the whole physical scenario, situation. It's one and the same. And if you go into the imagination and think about the problem, think about the situation, you're feeding the emotion. And you know you are, because it builds bigger and bigger and bigger. The feelings get bigger and stronger, and you lose yourself in it. You've done that. You've just done that. And what happens is that energy is fed down to the great, massive, unconscious bit underneath. Therefore, by thinking about the problems, the energy of the whole attachment, the whole iceberg, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger every time you're unhappy about something and you think about it, imagine it, relive it over and over. You're making this iceberg of emotion bigger and bigger and bigger. And even though in your own emotional surface you can only perhaps experience so much emotion at one time, this massive iceberg is there all the time, under the surface. So what's the option? Well, when there's a problem outside, and you know there's a problem because you're feeling a bit agitated, a bit disturbed, and the mind is starting to think and remember and imagine the problem, so you know there's a problem. Hold it still. Hold the mind still. This conscious area of emotion, hold it. Hold it with the mind. And just feel it. Feel it squirming. This is an amazing, incredible, fantastic process. If everybody did this and knew how to do this, the world would be a very, very different place. Very different. Because the emotion, you see, the surface bit, cannot survive in conscious awareness. Under the surface, it can be there forever. But it won't stay there forever, because the push is as like an iceberg, although the weight of it keeps it down, it is being lifted up to the surface nonetheless. An iceberg is not on the bottom of the sea, bobbing along the bed of the ocean. It's on the surface. The energy is there nonetheless, pushing the whole lot up to expose it, what it can. But only a small amount can be exposed at one time. Excuse me the noise, birds are flapping. And the emotion is exactly the same. Although the unconscious energy of the emotion is under the surface and it's vast, and you can only experience a tiny bit of the conscious awareness at one time, it is pushing it up nonetheless. The unhappiness on the surface will always, the emotion will always come up, always. While there's this unconscious unhappiness energy, jealousy, frightened, label it what you will, but it's the unconscious emotional energy underneath there. While that's there, no matter how peaceful and lovely and fantastic your life is, this has to come up. The energy has to come up to the surface at some point, because it has to be made conscious, you see. That's why this whole place is here. The energy, the unconscious energy beneath the surface has to be made conscious. So a situation will happen outside, the vast energy creates outside, and that brings the same bit of energy to the conscious awareness. So you've got the situation outside physically, and you've got the emotional connected to it inside. You're feeling it. The trick is then, as I've said, to hold the knowledge of this, hold the emotion still. Don't go into the imagination, don't relive it, think about it, worry about it, make it bigger, hold it. While you're doing that, keep looking at the situation, because this emotion connected to it, as that dissolves, the energy outside can dissolve, and the situation can change, and suddenly there's some activity, some action you find sometimes you need to take, because the situation is now different than it was. But just keep looking and keep holding the energy of it, the disturbance, and you'll find after a little while, depending on how big the problem, the emotion is, this will have gone. And at the same time, so with the external problem. Emotion as a feeling in the conscious bit cannot survive in conscious awareness. It's like shining a blowtorch on something. It just disintegrates it. Can take a little while, but if you hold it, it disintegrates it. But this massive, massive secret that no one knows and no one wants to know is the emotion you feel is the very energy creating the outside physical situation. It's one and the same. Dissolve, take the energy out of the conscious bit, dissolve that, and the one outside dissolves as well. For example, what happens to me at the moment is my waking life is nice and steady and easy and pleasant, but it's been happening for a few weeks now, months maybe. I might wake up in the early hours of the morning, 3, 4 o'clock, in the blackness, lying there, and suddenly a thought will occur to me. And another thought connected to that, about a scenario or situation in my physical life. And I know at that instant, the fact that the thoughts are joining up, that means there is emotion connected to that situation. There's something in there, however subtle, inside me. There is a disturbance under the surface, emotion, that needs to be made conscious, and that is giving me those thoughts. So instantly I hold it. Just hold it. Hold the impulse to think about the situation. I'm not going to call it a problem, because these things are quite subtle for me now, but there's an impulse to think about it which I hold. Just hold the knowledge, hold the sense of the impulse. Because I know at that moment, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, there's nothing I can do physically about it, and maybe there's nothing I can do at all anyway physically because it's out of my hands, but I know dissolving the emotion that I can feel, even just as an impulse to think about the problem, dissolving that is literally dissolving and resolving the problem outside. So in the trust, in the process that I have, if I can hold it, which I can, the next day I wake up and the external situation has resolved itself. It's gone. And that is the incredible thing. By lying in bed at night, holding and dissolving the emotion, just holding it, it means in the daytime when I next wake up, the physical problem has gone, fixed itself, resolved itself, doesn't exist. Someone's done something, said something, fixed something, changed something, or I realise it wasn't important anyway. Whatever it was, it's gone. Now can you imagine if everybody alive knew about this? If everybody alive was able, whenever some feeling, emotion came up, to hold it. In the knowledge that when they've got a problem, they're resolving the problem outside by taking the emotion out of it, making it conscious. Can you imagine the world would have of conscious, self-aware people who are living in the moment, dissolving the emotion as it came up? That'd be incredible. Everybody's life would be perfect. Now everybody would know that this iceberg, the fact they're still here, because it's the iceberg underneath the surface that is creating the moment-to-moment experience of separation, like I said. So everybody would have emotion, everybody would have this iceberg, and they would know It's pushing and pushing all the time to break the surface for a bit more to be made conscious. And it's like with a blowtorch, dissolve that on the surface, and that dissolves, and the whole thing lifts up slightly. The whole iceberg, melt the surface, melt the stuff above the top by the sun, melting it, and the whole thing is melting, isn't it? Regardless of how cold the water is, it's always above freezing because it's not freezing, it's water. But although moving water can be much colder, can't it? But that's another story. We won't go into too much science of it. The point is, the sun is coming down, melting the top that's above the water, and as it does so, the whole iceberg is moving up to keep the same percentage above the water and below, and the emotion exactly the same. It has to keep coming up. It has to keep coming up all the time. But all the time, the bit below the surface is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The attachment to being separate is getting more and more subtle. The experiences in the world, interactions, becoming more and more subtle. The difficulties and problems in one's life becoming more and more subtle, because there's not this massive amount of emotion pushing all the time, creating problems to bring more emotion to the surface, to have it made conscious all the time. That's gone. Just living in the moment with this iceberg that's bobbing along. Every so often, a bit of something comes to the surface, the attention on it dissolves it, and it's gone. No problem. So that's how emotion is like an iceberg. Only a very small amount of it is on the surface, and we're consciously aware of it. But the great, vast majority of it is below the surface, creating every situation, every moment, every experience, every sensation. And by holding the attention on the bit that's conscious, you're dissolving the bit that's unconscious. Because everything is one, you see. Everything is one. People say, spiritual people saying, things just happen, emotions just happen. And the physical world just happens, some great divine will. Well, it is. But it doesn't mean you're not allowed to understand it. And you can understand it. Because there's one being. And you realise you are it. You are the one being. And this emotional iceberg is you. You can dissolve yourself by conscious awareness. And life becomes simpler. Thank you.